Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Warriorcast podcast. This is the first podcast episode of the 2018-2019 year. My name is Mr. Dela Cruz. We are still searching for a host. Stop making me host because I really want to make this a student-centered podcast. But today's podcast was something that I've been wanting to do and many students have been wanting to do since last year. And it's going to be talking about everything and anything about the LGBT community. It's a community that I think is gaining more visibility, and I think positive visibility. A lot progress has has happened since I was a child in San Francisco, and I think there's still many challenges that are sort of affecting this community moving forward. Yeah, so I'll get into it. Let's have our guests introduce themselves. Maybe your name, what grade. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Jenna. I'm a junior at South City, and I'm the vice president of Spectrum.
I'm Helen. I am a junior at South City, and I am involved in Spectrum.
Helen is our publicist.
Yeah.
One of them.
Can you tell us a little bit about Spectrum, why you think it was important to have a organization like Spectrum at the school, which my understanding, it was historically called GSA, which in many schools it's called GSA, which stands for Gay Straight Alliance, and why you've moved towards using Spectrum, why you feel that's more encompassing of the community that you guys are in.
So Spectrum, as Mr. Dela Cruz said, is our school's GSA, which he says stands for Gay Straight Alliance, but more commonly now, GSA stands for Gender and Sexuality Acceptance, which is a more open and diverse name, and Spectrum is even more open and diverse because everyone there is a spectrum of things, so that's why we named it Spectrum. It's more diverse, and it's our club for LGBT people, for everyone. I like to say you don't have to be gay to join, you just have to be kind. And we talk a lot about things that aren't really discussed in school, like homophobia and racism, misogyny, misandry, and stuff like that. Helen, got anything to add?
Well, I think one reason we call it Spectrum instead of GSA is because GSA is still commonly seen as Gay Straight Alliance, and even if it's interpreted as another thing, we wanted to open it up to include more than just gay and straight people. Like, we wanted to include all kinds of sexualities, all kinds of genders, stuff like that.
Great. So I took a survey. I did a survey at the school, around 50 students, and I got like a plethora of different answers. So the first question was, how homophobic do you think is South City High School? Right. That was the question. I wanted to ask like a straight, kind of get to the nitty gritty. And a lot of people, I would say, so we got a really wide range, right? So we, 4 said that they gave it a 1, that it wasn't really homophobic. We had 2 people that gave it a 2 that gave it a 3, 7 that gave it a 4, so they felt like there was some homophobia, but like not a lot. Where we got higher numbers was 8s and 7s, right? So people felt like the homophobia at the school was at an 8, so they felt like it was at 15. And then people that marked 7 said that it was around, 8, 9, 11 people. So 11 for 7 and then 15 for 8. What do you think is your assessment? Because I think some people, obviously there's a range of interpretations. What do you think is your assessment of like the homophobia that you feel like is happening at our school community?
Well, I think a lot of people think that our school is very homophobic because there are a lot of people who still use slurs and still make jokes about being gay and being LGBT. And that can make a lot of people seem uncomfortable. But from my point of view, the school is obviously not as homophobic as, say, a school in like the Deep South or somewhere in the country. But it's part of like where our area is, like near San Francisco, where it's widely accepted. But there are still a lot of factors that make it worse than it could be because people aren't as educated about it as they could be. And that just causes a lot of homophobia and problems around that.
And I also think that South City can be homophobic in not like the major ways. Like, we don't push gay kids down the stairs and shove them into lockers. I think it's more internalized and vocalized. Like Helen said, I frequently hear people say the F word about anyone, not even towards gay people. I hear people say N word and just a lot of racial and gender slurs that are just thrown around, and they use it as normal vocabulary without even really realizing that there's something wrong with the word. And I think a lot of it is also the internalized homophobia of closeted gay kids, because I know it's hard to accept yourself. Like, I know that it's hard to accept and love yourself, especially now in this time where it's getting even harder with like bullying and all that stuff. So I think a lot of it isn't the major homophobia, it's like the tiny things that make it suck.
And I've heard that before, the idea of like the closeted gay kid who is almost like in a sense of denial. So it's almost like, let me hyper perform like quote unquote masculine behavior as a way to sort of mask like my sexuality that I'm afraid to confront. Like what do you think is the psychology behind that? Or like, yeah, like what do you think is the psychology behind why people, does it happen often? Or
it's pretty interesting that you bring it up, because for History Day, my topic is the Stonewall riots. If you don't know, that was the first gay pride, for lack of a better term. And I was doing research and I found a statement from the Gay Liberation Front, which is a gay organization that was made after Stonewall. And one of the very first things they said that they were going to try to stop is the psychological abuse of LGBT people. And it said that LGBT people don't really like themselves because of the way society conditioned them not to like themselves. And it really just stems back from the homophobia of the 19th century, the 20th century, and everything before.
And I think it's really interesting because of how people come to say things like that. And speaking from experience, because I've done that in the past, not with like slurs, but in denial. I think it happens because, like I said before, people aren't as educated as they could be about that subject. And so when they hear all these negative things about the LGBT community, they're like, oh no, I don't want to be associated with that. And it goes along with negative stereotypes of the community and of gay people. And I think it's just more of they don't want to be associated with the community, or they don't want to have that judgment placed on them. So instead they try to hide it and go along with the social norms so that they aren't subjected to as much abuse.
What do you brought up stereotypes? What do you think is like the worst stereotype that you've heard, or what do you think is the most prevailing stereotype in 2018 about?
It's just a phase. It's not a phase. Well, it can be. People have phases. The moon has phases, but it's still the moon. Just stop saying it's just a phase. You don't know what's going on inside their head.
Exactly. I think another one is when people associate, it's kind of in our modern society, kind of Hollywood, how it portrays gay people and how it's obviously not as well-rounded as people think it is. Like, you get the gay person who's like kind of feminine almost, and that can be very toxic.
I did actually talk about representation or survey groups. I asked the school community, roughly 50 students, like what grade would you give media representation of the LGBTQ community? What we got was mostly around the B range. So they gave it around B+, B or B-. I got a good chunk of C's and C-, but mostly B+ and then the B- range. Just this B. They thought it was pretty good. I don't know Where do you stand there? Like, how do you assess that? Because I think media now has sort of exploded. I think like growing up in like the 90s or back in the days, media was essentially just TV. But now there's like YouTube, and people are consuming YouTube more than they consume media. So I can understand the range, but as a whole, what do you think? What grade would you give it? And what do you think it's missing? What do you think it's falling short with? What do you think the media is failing in terms of portraying an accurate representation of the community?
Honestly, I would give it C plus at best. If I was feeling good, B minus. But the media is getting better at it. I know when I was young, I didn't really have any LGBT figures on my TV. The only one I can think of is Vice Ganda, who is a gay actor in the Philippines. It's pretty much the only one I can think of from my childhood. But now I can think of Haley Kiyoko, Brendan Urie, Keenan Lonsdale, Jesse Page, Dodie, a bunch of YouTubers and actors that are LGBT and out in their shows. I know Supergirl on the CW now has a transgender actor playing a transgender character. The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina on Netflix has a non-binary actor playing a non-binary character. Voltron has a non-binary voice actor now. So I think media is definitely getting better, but it's still lacking in the sense that many of the gay people we see are not really as diverse as you can say. It's getting better, but it's like average. It's like gay people for the straight person is my best description of it.
I really agree with that, because if we're talking about like YouTube consumption and social media, it is very it's kind of created by the community almost, so that people get exposed to it and they're used to it, so that helps a lot. But then when we're talking about media representation in, say, TV shows or movies, it's like you said, it was getting better. Like, there are a lot more LGBT actors and singers, but it's not as good as it could be. It's like there are a lot of stereotypes. Like, if you see a TV show, there's probably one or two gay characters, but they're only the gay characters. There aren't a lot of bi or pan or ace characters. I can think of like one or two asexual characters in TV shows in the past like decade or so. And the same is with movies. It's like it's kind of like made by straight people. Like, they have this idea of what a gay person should be like, and they portray that in the movies or the TV, but they don't really get like the extent and of like who they are as a person, because usually in worst cases their personality is that they are gay, and so that can cause a lot of problems. But overall, I'd say media representation is better than it was, definitely, but it's still not perfect.
Right. So like there's still like I don't even watch a lot of TV nowadays or consume much like YouTube. Mostly it's just music stuff. But I think there's still remnants of like oh, let's have a gay character, but his gayness is going to be the centrality of his character. Like it has to take center as opposed to other traits of his character. Like, there's still a lot of that happening, and people might feel like, oh, that's a good thing, and yes, I guess that's somewhat of progress as opposed to just not being non-existent. But like, if you're doing that all the time, it's almost like portraying gay people as like, oh, my humanity is all about my gayness and not so much about the multiple dimensions of what a person is, because essentially all people are complex, and so it kind of like oversimplifies the character in itself. Like, they just can't have a character who just happens to be gay, like, or happens to be lesbian. If it sometimes feels like they always have to somehow force that into sort of the narrative, which is important as well. But I think having a balance where you have both of those things, you get sort of a more robust and more accurate representation of the larger community.
If I can add on to that, I think one of the main problems is, like you said, that gay people are in TV shows just to be gay. And I think that's mainly because the studio that's putting this TV show into production doesn't want like, oh, this gay character just to be there. They're putting in a gay character because they want to say, hey, we have diverse characters and we're not going to do anything with his story. He's just there to be gay.
It's another thing. It's kind of like they want to show that they're diverse and that they want to appeal to that demographic, but they're also scared because a lot of people are still very homophobic, and so they're like, well, we don't want to lose those people, so we're going to be kind of in the middle, have a gay character, but not really go into exploration, just have them there so that it appeals to this side of the demographic, the LGBT community, while also not offending the homophobic part of the demographic.
So in a way, it's pretty like disingenuous.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we're just trying to fill diversity quota.
Yeah.
Like almost
Definitely.
like, hey, let's have a black guy in there just to have the black guy.
Exactly.
And maybe we'll pull in some black audiences. But generally, like, folks are keen on this stuff. Like, you can catch it. You can tell if it's really an authentic, like, well-intentioned, like, hey, we want this character because we really want the audience, all our audiences, even if our audience don't agree, to maybe perhaps learn something from this character. It's more like, hey, let's just, try and see if we can steal some gay viewership. Like that's, I feel like that's, and I hate when that happens because I see it happen with like comic books. I see it happen in sometimes in like animes. Like I feel like sometimes they'll try to like squeeze that in there as a means, as like a cheap pop to sort of garner viewership. Yeah, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, don't do that. People can tell. I'm telling you. They can tell when you're using gay people as a filler. They can tell and they will rip you apart. I'm like not even kidding. If you go on Tumblr, like there's this new show called She-Ra Princesses of Power, which is a reboot of the old series from the 80s, and then there's Voltron, another reboot from the 80s. Voltron has been under fire for like a few months now for an LGBT storyline that they kind of hyped up in a sense, and then a lot of people were really disappointed. Spoilers. Oh. And then She-Ra is another TV show that just came out, and spoilers, there are so many lesbians in it, I'm like telling you, like gal pals, and the distinct differences that people are pointing out. Voltron was written by straight people. The head of She-Ra is written by a woman who loves women, and yeah, they can tell and they will rip you apart. Don't go on Tumblr, it's toxic.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, and this is the thing, like, it's people, I feel like folks are keen on this. They're not easily fooled. Like, these are high schoolers, like they're on it, right? They know, and this is the life they live, right? People live these lives, and anytime you put like a person of color and you're not keen or you're not knowledgeable about the community, people will catch it easily because they know if it's authentic or not. Yeah. Let me jump into this question, and I think this question was, I feel like, one of the more important, well, not more important, but very important question among the survey. So I asked students at the school, is it harder for girls or boys to come out at the school? And most people said, what do you think they said?
I guess would be it's harder for guys to come out.
It's definitely harder for guys.
Yeah, overwhelmingly, right?
Yeah.
Only 3 people said it was harder for females, but overwhelmingly, 10, 20, 30, 40, 46 people have said that it was overwhelmingly harder for males to come out at this school. Why do you think that's the case?
I think it has a lot to do with toxic masculinity because, toxic masculinity is basically like the idea that a man has to act a certain way, like, the stereotype of manly man, like men don't cry or show their emotions, stuff like that. And so when that like follows along with the LGBT community, where a gay man has so many stereotypes put on them, like they're feminine or they're like they have to act a certain way,
Have long hair.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's kind of like this idea that if they come out, they'll be forced to adopt a different personality or like seen as a different person. Whereas with females, it's a little bit easier because I think it's more girls aren't expected to act all like girly girl. There's tomboys and things like that. it's still hard, but it's less so because people aren't as judgmental. There isn't that toxicness to how girls should act versus how guys are expected to act.
I think it's easier for girls to come out because of it's a fetish. People have fetishes for lesbians. I don't understand it. Like straight guys, they fetishize lesbians. There is this demographic. I don't know why. There is like this survey of all over the country. What is the most looked up porn on there? And like an overwhelming amount of it was lesbian porn. I was just like, what are you guys doing? Like, I think it's because people are so like used to this idea of like, oh, girl, I can use her for my entertainment. Doesn't matter if she's straight or gay. And then there's the guy here, and he's just like, hey, I'm gay, and people go, we don't care,
because they don't know what to do with them. Really, it's like girls are more prone to be taken advantage of versus how guys are just like the ones, like, not to stereotype, but they're the ones that are usually the people that are taking advantage of them.
And I think there's also the aspect that like straight men want to fantasize that like, oh, lesbians, that's hot. It's like, I'm acceptable of your sexuality as long as it's pleasing to my like sort of sexual fantasies, right?
Yeah.
It's not even about like, oh, let me be empathetic or sympathetic towards like your want to be your true self, right? I think it's more like, oh, it's okay to be out as long as you're a girl because, you know, that fits in with my own sexual desires to be with two women.
It's kind of fetishized to the point where it's kind of become a joke, and it's like not like taken seriously. So like you said, it's to the point where it's okay as long as it's pleasing. Like people are like, it's okay as long as it's pleasing me, you know.
Right, and they're obviously visualizing not like the like the short-haired lesbian. Like they're visualizing like, you know, your typical like, you know, Hollywood actress, you know, type lesbian. They're not trying to visualize, you know, someone that looks
like actual lesbians.
Quote unquote average or whatever according to Hollywood standards, right? They that's what they're sort of coming across from. When we talk about the idea of coming out, what does coming out mean for young people? What does it mean for young people to come out?
I think it's sort of this relief that they're not hiding anything anymore, and it's this relief like that they can be their true authentic selves, and if the people they come out to are supportive and they don't mind, then it's this even bigger relief of finally feeling loved and accepted as a person.
I think that coming out is kind of this acceptance of who you are, you know, like we discussed before, the toxic masculinity, the stereotypes. It's kind of like the denial people have. It's kind of like coming to terms with yourself and finding who you are. And a lot of people will be like, oh, it's just a phase or something like that. And it's kind of like discouraging because coming out is like a person's way of saying, I am who I am, accept me like for who I am, or, you know, it's, I don't know, it's hard to describe. It's kind of saying like, this is who I am, this is who I want to be, like take it or leave it, you know.
Right. Yeah, and I know, like, I don't know, but I feel like when people talk about coming out, there is that what you described, this weight, this release, right? This sense of like, now I can sort of live authentically, and it's not, I don't have to always mask and be so sort of watchful of like my sexuality. Like straight people, heterosexual people, they don't have to police their expressions, right? They don't have to police any expression that might be misconstrued as not heterosexual, right? They can be sort of who they are, right? Like I as a straight man can go in different places around the world and be expressive about my sexuality. I can talk about women, right, in romantic ways, and I can be pretty certain that I will not receive harm for that, right? And so like sometimes people don't understand these aspects of privilege that not everyone has, right? That to have to police yourself constantly, it can be emotionally taxing, can be emotionally difficult for people.
Yeah, it's like it's very hard for LGBT people to be able to walk around, and like I always see these posts on like Instagram where it's just like, imagine a world where this and this, and they're like, oh, imagine a world where love is illegal. You don't have to, you live in one. That's a thing. Like India just decriminalized homosexuality like 2 months ago. In Egypt, people are getting killed for being suspected of being gay, not for actually being gay, for being suspected. And just recognize your privilege and recognize that it may be hard for LGBT people to like walk around and be their true authentic selves when a lot of the things they see are not supportive of who they are.
People that might be like new to new to gender stuff, and I feel like this is such a growing body of like gender and sexuality. It's such a in academia, it's such a growing discipline of knowledge. Like I feel like it's growing at a faster rate than say studies on race. And I was mainly like an ethnic studies student in college, so like I did take some sociology courses, so I got a little bit of the gender stuff. So for people that don't know, like there's like pronouns in other countries, like there's like they have different terms and different ways of addressing people by proper pronouns. So like maybe explain like pronouns, like and when people ask like what's your preferred pronoun, like what that means, and how that's like why we should practice this sort of thing.
Well, I think with pronouns, it's kind of a way of saying, like with coming out, it's saying this is who I am, take it or leave it. And so when people misuse your pronouns, then it's kind of like denying that you ever came out or that you are who you are. And it's not to say that your pronouns or like what you want to be called is your whole personality. It's just something that it's like a big part of it. It's coming to terms with like what you like, what you dislike. You know, being called she when you're actually he can be demeaning because, you know, if you don't feel comfortable being a female or something, then a person calling you a female would be like denying that you are who you are.
And for those of you guys wondering, like it's okay to mess up pronouns as long as you're respectful of it and always correct yourself. I struggle with pronouns sometimes if I'm not used to it, but just let people get a hang of it and they will get it if they're nice. If they're not nice, you should probably cut them out of your lives if they're being toxic to you. And we got a lot of questions in Spectrum, like, how do I ask someone for their pronouns without seeming weird? And we just go, just ask them. It's not that hard. And usually people really don't care. And if you get their pronouns wrong, usually people will correct you. And yeah, just ask. We don't bite. We swear. Like, we're very nice. Just ask. It's okay to have questions. The Spectrum officers are always open to having questions, and we're always open to answer.
And another thing, like if like we said, just ask for pronouns if you're not sure. But if you like aren't able to ask or you don't want to, a good term to use is they, because it's kind of not
it's gender neutral.
Gender neutral, yeah. So if you're not sure, just use they, and then when you get the chance or like over here something, you can use that pronoun and be like, hey, do you want to be called this? And they'll usually be like, yeah. Or no if you messed up, but you know.
And I think that's a great point. I think sometimes people misportray, like when people misgender people, they feel like, oh, they're gonna say I'm bullying and they're gonna report like that doesn't like people understand that we lived in a culture like or we are living in this culture where we're so used to the binary, right? And that like it's going to take time for that to shift culturally, right? And that like there are cultures that are ahead of us, like Sweden is ahead of us in terms of like disrupting this idea that there are just two genders, right? And other countries, in many European countries, they don't even have gendered bathrooms. It's just like gender neutral. Like you just use the bathroom. I think even in some colleges, I think at SF State they had a gender neutral bathroom. And I went in there and like it was like a new experience for me. I was like, wow. I didn't feel like it was weird. I didn't feel like there was like creepers in there, as people might say. It's just like people using the bathroom. Like no one's in the bathroom to be creepy. They use the bathroom to use the bathroom. Like, you know? And so like it's I think that was a great point to sort of raise.
And if you don't know, we do have a gender-neutral bathroom here at South City. It's in G-Wing. Fun fact.
Oh, there is?
There is. It's in G-Wing.
Right. Nice. Okay. I have two questions. You can answer this one or you can answer the last. I'll ask this last one. Can you maybe talk about Day of Silence? I was going to say Day of the Dead because it just passed. Okay. Can you talk about Day of Silence, what that is and why that's important?
Okay. So Day of Silence is a day made by Glisten, which is a gay organization. I can't remember what it stands for, but their name is Glisten. And Day of Silence this year in 2018 was April 27th, I believe.
I think so.
And then next year is 2019, Day of Silence is April 12th. So if you don't know, Day of Silence is a day where people swear to be silent all day. Like, they will refuse to talk, and it's to commemorate the fact that LGBT bullying does happen, and they really don't get a voice in this situation. So we take away our voices to represent the voices that were stolen by the bullies and the victims that are being stolen. And if you don't know, last Day of Silence, last year when I was a sophomore, they did this new thing where we had Day of Silence, we were all silent, and then in sixth period, before the bell rung, 10 minutes before, we went out into the front of the school, and the literal second the bell rung, we all just screamed as a symbolic way to break the silence. So that's something that we do. Not all schools do it, but yeah, Day of Silence is a really cool thing that we plan to do, and it's our way of taking a stand against bullying for all people, not just LGBT people.
Great, and that's also a great way for folks to be involved, right? I feel like it's a great entryway for people to people who like want to be allies, right? That want to, you know, they might be like on the fence where they might feel like, oh, I don't, you know, not necessarily want to be part of Spectrum because they're afraid they might get bullied, but it's a way to like show support, right? And to participate and say, you know what, and to do it authentically, not just because you don't want to answer questions in class, you know, like to really be authentic about standing against like bullying in our communities.
Yeah, and you don't have to be gay to participate. You could just show your support by, you know, being involved.
Like in Spectrum, we don't ask you if you're gay. We kind of just let you in. Just listen to us talk for a little while.
As long as you're polite.
Participate in our activities, and we're just like, cool. Okay. Yeah.
Cool. When do y'all meet?
Spectrum meets every Tuesday and Friday in D24. That's Mr. Kelly's room. And we do a lot of fun stuff. Yeah.
At lunch.
At lunch.
Okay. Last question. What recommendations would you give for people like, you know, people first like TV shows, music, maybe YouTubers or commentators that you would think they can learn more about the community, or you feel like maybe even like characters that you felt like are just great representations of the LGBT community, and or getting more information about, you know, how to be a better ally, how to just learn more and be a more well-rounded person.
Listen to Hayley Kiyoko. That's a personal preference. There's not really a lot of advice. It's just that I really love Hayley Kiyoko. But actual advice, there's a YouTuber I like. Her name is Jessie Page. She recently came out as bisexual over the summer, and she does a lot of videos where she's doing not really LGBT videos, some LGBT videos, but really life advice and all that stuff. She's really funny and she's really sweet and she's really cool and she's kind of a dork, but I love her anyway. And she recently released 2 videos where she talked to her mother about her coming out and how she came out over Twitter and then had an anxiety attack over it. And they talked about a lot of things like why it's so important to come out to some people and the importance of being accepting and a lot of things like bisexual erasure and all that stuff. So I definitely recommend watching her. Helen?
There's this musical artist that I recently found out he was gay. And before I found out, I listened to his songs and they're all about like love and stuff. And so I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. And I researched it up and I found that he had a husband. And I saw the songs in like a different way because, you know, he was gay from the start. He was making music, you know. And in that way, it's kind of like you can see it in a different light. His name is Rufus Wainwright, by the way. He's pretty good. But you know, if you look at it in a certain way, like his songs are kind of about his life, you know. It's pretty cool. And then there's a couple of shows, Steven Universe. I haven't seen it yet, but
I have. I love it.
It's a good representation, I hear.
It's on Netflix?
It's on Cartoon
wish.
Network. It's not on Netflix.
Okay.
I wish it was on Netflix. If you don't know, it's made by Rebecca Sugar on Cartoon Network. She was the first woman to actually create a show on Cartoon Network, and it's mostly female characters, and the characters, she calls them non-binary women. Like, they don't have a gender binary, but they're okay with the citizens of Beach City, which is where they're from, calling them women. And they have the cutest characters, and I love them. And they were one of the first shows on Cartoon Network to have an LGBT wedding with an actual LGBT kiss in it, which is pretty cool.
Nice.
And
Go ahead, finish.
and isn't there like Legend of Korra?
Legend of Korra, yes.
Is that the Avatar?
Yeah, Avatar.
The Avatar.
Yeah.
She's bi.
Oh,
Nice.
I did not know that. I watched a few episodes, but that's great. Yeah.
Yeah.
People often, they will hold, people will fight you over Avatar. They like hold Avatar as like a great,
it's
one of the
God
greatest cartoons ever. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to call it cartoon because it's like an insult.
It's a cartoon.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna lie, it's a cartoon.
Yeah.
Any last thoughts? Any last words before we close out?
Follow Spectrum on Instagram at SSFHS-Spectrum. We also have a Snapchat, SSFHS-Spectrum. So follow us on that. We have a lot of cool updates and pictures and yeah.
Yeah, do that. Don't be afraid to be who you are.
Yep.
You know, we haven't... Oh, yeah. Yeah, don't be afraid. If you need to talk, Spectrum will be here, like we said, D24.
D24.
Mr. Kelly's room. If you need to reach us, like, we're pretty easy to reach, honestly. We're kind of obnoxious. But,
Yeah, our personal
good way.
Instagram.
Yeah.
Our personal Instagrams are tagged on the Spectrum Instagram. There's a picture of all of our officers. They're all tagged, and they're all really reachable. And if you're too afraid to talk to us to our faces, we totally understand. In D24 on Mr. Kelly's desk, we actually have a jar for questions if you need it. And just drop by questions, and the next meeting we go to, and if we see questions, we're there. We're going to get it, we'll check it, and we'll answer it. We'll definitely answer it. Just get us a way to get the answer back to you.
So thank you so much. I feel like you two are just so knowledgeable. There's so much more to like. There are so many questions like I have, but we're gonna shut it down here because then we would be here till 6 or so.
We can come back.
Right. No, I'm definitely down for like a run back at some point. Especially if like, you know, more things happen like in politics and if new shows arises. I'll be checking out Steven Universe.
Yeah.
I have a toddler. I'm all about doing trying to expose him to and even that, I'll add this, like sometimes it's hard, like I have to be very like vigilant in like the children's books that he has. Like, is he getting a wide range of depiction of people of color, of people of different genders and backgrounds? And so like I have to sort of do that. And so it's always nice to get like great recommendations like that, because he loves his cartoons right now. So thank you. We'll close that here. Please share the podcast with as many people as you can. And thank you for listening.